Hey everyone, back today with another video. Today I want to talk about the champions that you can farm for in the campaign, which ones are worth farming for, and how much you should invest in them. So, without any more messing around, let's actually jump into that and see what our options are. The first one I actually want to talk about is in the sewer, so the second chapter, and it's actually an uncommon. And Skinner is a champion where I wouldn't say that you should invest in him right away, but if you find that you need his help in a couple of areas I'm going to talk about in a minute, then you definitely should, and you should invest as much into him as you need to succeed in those areas. So, first of all, he's Magic Affinity, and his A2 attacks one enemy and removes 2 random buffs. And if you farm for more Skinners, you can get this book down to a 3-turn cooldown to remove 2 buffs. Now, you're using him for the magic keep, right? So to remove the shield and any other buffs that get placed on the boss of the magic keep. That is his main purpose. Additionally, he also has a triple hit A1. So on the off chance that you are needing to go into Fire Knight for one of the missions, and you don't have enough multi-hitters, but you have enough turn meter reduction, he can join your team for that. Those are really the only 2 places that I see Skinner as being useful, but if you need him for those areas, I think he's worth investing in. I wouldn't ascend him at all. I would only try to get the books for his A2 if possible. Definitely get him to at least 40. If you find that he doesn't survive and you're not succeeding in the content you want him in, go ahead and get him to 5-star. You don't have to take him all the way up to 50, just getting him up to 35 or 40 or so. Just to have the better base stats to be able to survive is quite nice for him. But eventually you will probably use him as food for your other champions, so I definitely would not encourage you to get him to 60 or give him any ascensions or anything like that. But aside from that, I think he is good enough for those 2 areas that if you need help in either breaking the shield for Fire Knight or removing the shield from the Magic Keep, he's very, very serviceable in either of those areas. Now, past that, it's going to be more champions that have been heard about a little bit more, especially this first one. So we've got Spirit Host. I think that she's just a very strong champion in general early on. Great for Dragon and early arena, especially before you even get High Katoon, or before your gear is good enough that you would want to use 2 nuking champions. So first of all, you want to ascend her. You would want to get her to at least 3, so that her A2 is the big version of increase attack. Partially because you're using her early on in your arena team, if you have nothing better, for the 10% speed aura and the attack up on your nuker. Because until you get enough gear that you can, reasonably have 2 nuking champions, just having the increase attack buff on the one nuking champion you have is going to be better for you. Additionally, having Dark Gift just is very, very strong. Like removing all the buffs, placing the block debuff, that is something you definitely want in Dragon. It is a quite helpful ability for you. So once you move Spirit Host out of your arena team, and you can put her into Dragon, and especially if you give her a shield set, getting her to at least 50 to survive in Dragon is what you want. If you don't end up getting better champions for Dragon, she is still very strong, even pushing far into Dragon, so getting her to 60 isn't out of the question. I wouldn't necessarily suggest it, but if you have no other champions that are good in Dragon, I would go ahead and do that as your the last part of your team for Dragon if you need her to push forward. In terms of books, you only need 1 to lower the cooldown here and 1 to lower the cooldown here, so that's quite easy to farm for her in this stage, especially since there's another rare champion that you can farm for in this stage that needs a lot of books for their cooldowns. So I think she's very good and definitely worth investing in, like I said, for very early game arena and then moving into your Dragon team. The other champion, Greybeard, he is very good to help you with the waves in really any of the dungeons, but specifically for Dragon. How you would want to build him is you would want to have him be your lowest HP member on your team, so that he gets targeted by the waves. And because of that, interestingly, I don't think his A1 is particularly helpful for him in that role. Everything's going to be attacking him anyway, since he will have the lowest HP. So I mean, it's obviously not a negative to have a provoke on his A1, but it's not the reason we're choosing him. The reasons we're choosing him is his A3 places a shield based off of defense. It does give counterattack, so occasionally you will get some provokes off, forcing the waves to only use their A1s, which is nice. It does reduce damage to some extent. But we get a shield on a 4-turn cooldown that gives counterattack. And then his A2, after you get it all the way up to level 7, is a 3-turn cooldown AoE, 40% chance to freeze. So if all of the wave is alive, you're looking at, on average, freezing 2 of them. So it does prevent quite a bit of damage, Greybeard does, with his A2. Obviously, his A3 placing a shield also helps reduce damage. And his aura is very strong. It's a 30% defense aura. So he is going to be very, very strong for your early dragon team if you don't have anything better. So obviously, to unlock the aura, you do need to ascend him to level 3. I think that's definitely worth it. If I were you, I would definitely level him up all the way to 50. If it turns out that you don't have a better tank or crowd-controlled champion as you move further into Dragon, I think he's a perfectly reasonable champion to get all the way up to 60. The only downside for him is you need 4 books here and 6 books here. So you're going to be farming in the stage for quite a while unless you want to use your actual rare books on him. So it is up to you, but that is a lot to be farming for. So it does make up the fact that Spirit Host didn't require very many. So possibly just farming in here for a while will be useful, but that's up to you. But I would definitely, at the very least, farm for them, get them booked up, both of them to at least 50. And honestly, depending on what your roster looks like, in the long term, getting them to 60 is not out of the question. Now, past that, we're actually going to go much further in the campaign to another area that I think there's 2 champions worth investing in. The first being the obvious one, War Maiden. Obviously, any sort of video or list that you hear about farmable champions or free-to-play champions, War Maiden's always on that list. The fact that she has the defense down, AoE, is huge. You clearly want to ascend it to 3 so that it goes from the small buff to the big version of the buff, and then increases the chance all the way up to 100, and then getting that cooldown down to 3 is what you want. So you'll definitely want to ascend her to 3. Her other skills only increase damage with books, so they're not as necessary. But you do definitely want to get all the way down to here. There's definitely never going to be any regret getting her all the way up to 50. If I were leveling a new account, I would probably make War Maiden my number 2 6-star. I think she's definitely worth investing in, and she never really falls off. Like, she's something that you can use in the end game. Like, you can use her in level 20 dungeons, because this is a very, very strong skill. I myself use her in Dragon 20 on my main account. Like, she is a very strong champion and worth investing in. So any sort of ascensions or books or even masteries, this is the first one that I would definitely say is worth investing masteries in. If you end up using Spirit Host or Greybeard in the very long term, then you could put some masteries in them, but War Maiden you definitely should. So she's just a very, very strong champion, and you will not regret any sort of investment you make in her at all. The other champion at this level is Berserker, who gets some amount of attention, more so by players focusing on Arena, because he is a very reasonable second nuker for your Arena team. So if you end up switching into something that looks like Haikatune into War Maiden, starting champion as a nuker, and then Berserker as a second nuker, it's a very reasonable team that easily can get you into silver once you start farming gear. I think he's a great champion to fill that role. In terms of Ascension, Sweep is really the ability you're going to be using most often to try to clean up a couple of champions in the arena. Getting that extra 20% defense reduced is something that you are in the market for, so you want to ascend him to 3 if possible. Past that, it is all just damage, but that's all you're bringing him for. So you're going to be spending a good amount of time farming the Deadlands anyway to try to get War Maiden, get books for War Maiden. So wherever Berserker ends up landing with getting more copies of Berserker is fine. If you want to come back and then max him out in books, I think that's reasonable as well, since you are bringing him for damage. Another big thing about Berserker is he is a spirit affinity nuker. So on any of the dungeons that happen to be force on particular levels, those tend to be where a lot of players struggle, especially early on, because your starting champion is magic. So anytime you have an area that is negative affinity for your starter, you tend to struggle a bit. So he helps out tremendously there. So I would definitely bring him up to at least 50, get him 3-star Ascension. If you are focused on Arena and don't have a better nuker, I would go ahead and bring him up to 60. At the very least, get the first 2 rows of masteries. I think they would be very useful for Berserker. Just getting the crit and crit damage from the offense tree at the very least. Because you are going to want to get him to 100% crit and push up his crit damage where you can. So I think he's definitely another champion worth investing in. Because again, you can use him in Dragon to help get through the waves. In Spider, you're wanting to do a bunch of AoE damage up to 13 or 14 anyway, so he'll be useful for that. So I definitely think he is a champion. At the very least, get up to 5-star. If you're not opening something better, then I think he's a very reasonable 3rd or 4th champion to get up to 6-star. So I think Berserker's a great champion as well. So those are the 2 in here. One thing that I do want to just give a very short acknowledgement to from Felwyn's Gate is Rocktooth. And it's only if you're struggling with the Spirit Keep, because of his A3 that places a heal reduction. So I would have no problems leveling Rocktooth up to 40 and ascending this skill, because it won't just be for the Spirit Keep, because he is also used for the Raz Infusion. And presumably we're all going to be working for the Raz Infusion, so getting him up to 4-star and ascended anyway is something we need to do. But if getting him up to 4-star is enough to keep him alive and place the debuff on the boss in the Spirit Keep, then that's great, and he'll be useful to help push a little further in there. If you really need to push further and he's dying in that, then you can get him up to 50, but since he's strong affinity, it's possible that he can live at 40, depending on what sort of shield sets and heals or auras that you have for him. But Rocktooth is reasonable if you need that heal reduction. I wouldn't try to work on his skills here, because you really just need to land it the once and do a bunch of damage after that. But he's worth looking at if you don't have heal reduction elsewhere. You could get him up to level 5 to 5-star if you are having trouble keeping him alive in the Spirit Keep and you need to farm that for potions. But I definitely would not 6-star him ever. There's no reason to give him masteries, and I wouldn't spend the time for books for him either. So I just wanted to give a very short mention to him in the off chance that you are needing help in the Spirit Keep. And the very last one on my list is Diabolos. So Diabolos is another champion that you can use early on in the arena. So when you're using Spirit Host as your speed aura for the arena, before you get High Katun, I think Diabolos is very strong for your turn meter increase. Once you get to the point where you replace the 2 of them with High Katun and a second nuker, I think Diabolos, just like Spirit Host, is very good for your Dragon team if you put her in a shield set. So you'd have 2 shield sets and you'd have a lot of survivability, which means the increased speed buff that you're going to get from her, and then the turn meter, and definitely, again, worth ascending her for making this skill better to decrease the enemy turn meter by 15%. That is definitely noticeable, especially on the waves in Dragon. So getting the 2 books for her from farming more in Chapter 12, and then the 3 in here for this cooldown shouldn't take you very long, especially since you'll probably be farming in Chapter 12 for food quite a bit. The A1 is fine. It goes from a 10% to put a sleep debuff to a 20% to place a sleep debuff. Obviously, there's 100% more sleep debuffs that she's going to be placing. On the other hand, in the areas that you'll use her, you're doing a lot of AoE damage. So how important is a sleep debuff really? It's kind of hard to tell. I wouldn't put a lot of emphasis on it, but it is free on her A1 as well. So I would, if you plan to use her in your dragon team, I would definitely get her to 50 because the extra HP for the shield set that you put on her will make a difference, both in her survivability and your whole team's survivability. So I think she's worth investing in that. Like I said, for your early arena team, if you're looking at Spirit Host, Diabolist, War Maiden in your starter, I think that's perfectly reasonable until you get High Katoon, and then switching that out to High Katoon, War Maiden, your starter, and Berserker. I think those are very reasonable early on arena teams and should get you into silver once you get sufficient gear. So those are definitely the champions that I would get and how I would invest in them. So just a couple of quick mentions. Executioner is interesting. He also has a defense aura. He decreases turn meter and can place decreased speed. So it's almost a crowd control like ability. And then his A3 increases his defense. So he could fill a similar role that Greybeard would. In the sense that you just keep him at a very low HP so that he's the one that gets targeted, and he's also magic affinity as well. I just think that Greybeard fits that role a little bit better. I think it is kind of up to preference, but I personally just like Greybeard more. So if you don't like Greybeard, you could use Executioner. Greybeard does have better base stats, and he has a better defense aura. So that's worth thinking about. You're basically giving up the increased defense buff for a shield, and instead of decreasing turn meter and placing decreased speed, you're placing some amount of freezes. So I think they're very similar champions. I just personally prefer Greybeard. And since you already are going to be farming in Durham Forest for Spirit Host, spending the extra time I think is perfectly fine to get Greybeard. Now, the other 2 champions that I just want to give a quick mention to that I don't think I would work on myself, but you could, Conqueror. So the couple of things that he does is A2 also removes random buffs, just like Skinner does. His A1 is a 2-hit, so it can be helpful in Fire Knight. This could be helpful in the Magic Keep. And then he has, if he kills an enemy with his A3, it can't be revived, so it could be useful in Ice Golem. The only problems that I have with Conqueror is Skinner, with his A1 and A2, fulfill that role better. So Skinner is not Spirit Affinity, so the Spirit Affinity of Conqueror is definitely a negative here, because we're mostly wanting to use this for the Magic Keep, and he's just going to get weak hits, whereas Skinner would not. The A1 only attacks 2, Skinner attacks 3 times. So really the only advantage Conqueror has is the fact that he has his A3. But you have to make sure that he has enough damage that he's the one that's killing the ads in Ice Golem. And to be fair, I don't think you should be focusing on Ice Golem that early anyway. And by the time you do work to Ice Golem, I imagine you'll definitely have better champions. I just wanted to point out that he does have kind of a similar skill set that Skinner does. I just think Skinner does his job better. And the last champion is Valkyrie, which I know a lot of people like her a lot. The A2 is nice, reduces the duration of all buffs increases the duration, of all buffs by a turn. So any of your things that you have, like increased speed especially, get boosted by this. The fact that it increases the duration of debuffs is nice as well. It helps with your poisons, and it gives the increased attack. So she's a pretty reasonable champion. And then her A3 gives just a shield, and then can heal based on the buff. So it's going to do some amount of shielding, some amount of healing. Personally, since I already would be leveling up Spirit Host and Diabolist, I don't think I need Valkyrie. But I think that's completely up to you if you decide that you want to use her. Again, I would not do any more than ascending her to 3 times. Make sure you get the cooldown on this skill. And then at most get her to 50. But I think using Diabolist and Spirit Host as your more support champions for dungeons is the best way to go. So those are all the champions that I would consider from the campaign, and how I would, as far as I would go to invest in them. So thank you for watching this today. Again, every night I do stream at twitch.tv/cluelesseconomist, and that's at 7 p.m. Central Time, so right when the dailies reset. So I hope to see you guys then. Thank you.